Thank you for joining. My name is Ben. I'm on the product marketing team here at Sentry. And today we are going to cover getting started with cron monitoring, not specifically cron monitoring as defined by the Unix operation, but scheduled jobs or any kind of recurring job. For today, please introduce yourself, say where you're from, where you work, what you do, what your latest TV show binge is. Mine, for example, is Silicon Valley. I'm a little late to the game on this one, but it aged great and it's still hilarious. So for today's agenda, we have Evan Percher, who is an engineer at Sentry, and Aran Arkin, who is a director of product management. And they're going to go over why Sentry is doing crons, what cron monitoring at Sentry is, what existing and future capabilities are, and then Evan is going to run through a demo app, how to configure it, how to set it up, how to configure your alerts, and then go over a really cool feature, which is how you can trace your failed check-ins to errors, and then also how you can see the performance of a job over time for a specific monitor in cron monitoring as well. And then finally, Evan's going to go through a really cool feature around how to auto-register your monitors using Celery Feed. And at the end, we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. So with that, Aran, if you'd like to kick it off.
Yes, thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. Let me ask you this. What if you could not just catch errors, but all software defects before they disrupt your business? Sounds ideal, isn't it? Well, let me share with you some exciting update to Sentry today. My name is Aran, and I'm Director of Product Management here at Sentry. I work on helping you ship high-quality software with confidence. As you can see here, we started with error or exceptions to be accurate. That's the core of what Sentry does and probably why you heard about us. But our mission is broader. It is to empower you to identify and address the full spectrum of software defects. We're building Sentry to be your one-stop shop for ensuring software quality built for developers. The next critical step in our journey is to add, guess what? Cron job monitoring or other recurring tasks. So let's shift to the next slides. Why do we even start on this, right? So cron jobs often operate in the background, out of sight and out of mind. But when they fail, the consequence can be disastrous, really bad. Imagine, for instance, it's Black Friday and a cron job responsible for inventory updates fails. Suddenly, your website starts displaying incorrect stock levels, leading to lost sales and frustrated customers. That's a nightmare that nobody wants, and we're here to help you avoid that. That's why we're thrilled to introduce cron job monitoring. This tool offers real-time notification, intuitive dashboards, and connected to the workflow that you're already familiar with. So where we are right now, next slide. So we started a beta in December 2022. This was like basically a heroic effort by one engineer to get to a beta. We staffed up a team that you have with you today. And we're iterating with the community since then. So we have launched major features like, integration with popular framework like, Vercel. We support multiple environments, alerting, Upser, the ability to start a monitor from code, and so forth and so forth. And we're really committed to this area. We got a ton of good feedback, a ton of traction from the community. And we're happy to announce that our tentative GA date for the feature will be in later this year. So with that in mind, next slide, please. We got really good customer insight, really good customer feedback. It's integrated with Sentry, and we hope that we will help you avoid more of your software defects. And remember, this isn't just about monitoring cron job. It's just a step toward giving you a 360-degree view of your software health. It is Sentry that but even better. Now we'll have Evan, our TL, demo you how you can easily set up and integrate cron job monitoring into your existing workflow, followed by Q&A. Evan, please. Let me mute.
Let's make sure I can share now. There we go. Okay, sorry about that, y'all. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I've got a few demos for us to look at today. And kind of just to give a little brief here, this is definitely not all the product can do. This, we support a number of different SDKs, and a number of different platforms, but I'm just going to show some pretty simple examples here, with one kind of a little bit more advanced one, and kind of just go over all the features. So let's start with kind of the most basic example where, maybe you're kind of old school and you're still using the kind of Unix cron tab system. You have one of these cron tab files, which might look something like this, or you have a schedule, and then you have a script that you want to run. So in this example, I have a run payment processing or run process payments script that runs once an hour on the 0th minute of every day, of every month. So if we go ahead and look at that script, let's do this. Looks like all it does is just run this process payments.py. And so if we look at that, it looks like all that does is process some payments, then sleep, and you can imagine that it does a whole bunch of stuff. But it also looks like in some cases it might fail. So let's go ahead and just do that and see what it does. So you can imagine this is what your cron tab would do every hour, is just run this. And then perhaps you might have an issue where it fails. And in that scenario, it would look like this. And of course, if you don't have any sort of monitoring set up, this is just going to kind of silently happen. Maybe you have some logging, but then of course you have to be looking at the logging. So this is kind of where Sentry is going to come in to help. So let's take a look at what it would look like to instrument that monitor with Sentry. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to thing out of the way. I'm going to jump over here to Sentry. There we go. Okay, so we've got this new Crons tab over here on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my first cron monitor. So let's go ahead and name it payment processing. We'll put it in the Python project since it's a Python script. And we'll make the schedule match here. So you can see this schedule matches the cron tab format that we had back in our cron tab file. There is also a interval mode if you want kind of the simpler, just run once every day. But generally, I think the cron tab, pretty much anyone that's used it will understand it. We'll leave everything else default for now, and let's go ahead and hit next. There we go. So like I said, we have a number of different platforms, and it's already defaulted to the Python platform here for me since I selected a Python project. But I want to start simple. So let's start with just using the Sentry CLI, which is kind of the generic way to monitor any sort of script, any sort of, anything, any kind of binary that just runs on Linux, right? So if we look at this, it looks like we're exporting our Sentry DSN key. And then it looks like we're calling Sentry CLI with the monitor subcommand. Then we're calling the run command. And then here, I think we're giving it the name of our monitor. So payment processing, you can see in the URL, the slug is payment-processing. And then the script that we want to run. So let's go ahead and just copy this and come back over here and open up our run process payments. Let's comment this one out. And we'll put this one here, copy this guy over, save that. So now, if we run our run process payments, should see that it's still doing the exact same thing. So again, you can imagine that this is happening in your cron tab every hour. But if we now jump back over to Sentry and refresh this page, and this might take a second. Oh, looks like it's already going. Let's actually just look at the last hour here. We can see that we already have a successful check-in. And if we're just looking at this page, we can see the last check-in was 25 seconds ago. The next one would be expected an hour from now, 11 on the dot, since our schedule is at the 0th minute of the hour. But of course, the first check-in that I send could be anytime just to get things started. We can see down here the list of check-ins, and then we can just kind of see here, this would be kind of the status breakdown of the check-ins for this duration. So let's go back and kind of look at the example of what would happen if it fails. So if I run this again, this time I pass the fail argument. So we can see now we have that exception. And like I said before, we might not have had any insight into this, but now if we come back over here and give this page a refresh again, and like I said, it might take it a second just to get through our ingestion pipeline. It's not instant, but it should happen pretty quickly here. This is the best part of live demos, is the waiting and the hoping. But I can say that I did this yesterday, and okay, we've got our in progress, and I think we should see the close check-in here in just a second. There we go. Okay, so we had our okay check-in, and then we just ran it again, and this time we had a failed check-in. So we look down here, we can see that it failed. So already pretty helpful, already pretty useful to see like something went wrong. And again, this is kind of just the very generic example of I have something and I just want to monitor it with Sentry. But I think we can do better. So let's go back and let's look at one of our other examples here. So I have this Python SDK example. So if we look again, it's basically the exact same thing. Everything here is the same from last time. It's still this process payments.py, still does the exact same thing, still have this run process payments, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to show now, if we go ahead and go back and create a new monitor, and we'll call this one Python process payments in the Python project. We'll go ahead and set the schedule to be the same again. And we'll go ahead and hit next here. So like I said a second ago, it selected Python for me. It did that for a reason, is because this is kind of the suggested way to do it if you're using Python. So let's follow the steps here. So the first thing we want to do is install and configure our Sentry Python SDK into our Python script. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already installed the Sentry SDK, so we should just have to copy this. Let me just make sure it's set to the right project key. And we'll bring this guy over. So let's go ahead and open up that process payments.py. Just go ahead and paste this right here. We don't care about this. And then if we come back over and jump back to the rest of the setup here, it looks like it says add this decorator to instrument your Python function. So we'll just import this Sentry SDK Crons monitor decorator. So that monitor. Stop that on here, and it's already filled in the key, the monitor slug key for us. So I think if we save that, let me make sure I got that right, is Sentry SDK Crons import monitor. Never trust my typing. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so now in this scenario, instead of using the Sentry CLI, we've actually instrumented it directly using our Python SDK. So one of the really cool advantages of doing this is this actually brings in the entire Sentry that you know and love, in the sense that any errors that happen in here will fully be captured by Sentry. So by initializing the SDK, when we have, for example, this processing failed error, Sentry not only will capture the failed monitor check-in, but it will also actually capture the failed, or well, the exception, and it will capture the full stack trace. It will capture any other additional context about the run, and it will give that to you in kind of the usual Sentry issue overview. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So we'll start here just kind of with, again, the example of it working. But let's go ahead and also pass it the fail argument here. Let me refresh this, just make sure that it shows up. Yep, so we've got our in progress, and we should see the completed one. There we go. But let's go ahead and make it fail. So what does that look like? So already we've got the exact same exception going on here, but let's go ahead and refresh this page. And we've already got our failure here. And it might take it just a second to ingest the issue, but looks like if we look at our failure column here, again, kind of same thing. We've got the last hour for this. We've got our success, we've got our failure. You can see it here, but now you can see over here under this issues section, we can actually see the issue that was generated during the run. So if I go in and open this, I can actually see the full stack trace of what happened and what went wrong, right? And I've got all my tags. You know, you could imagine that you've kind of set up your Sentry a little bit more deeply, and you'll have kind of additional context into the actual exception. So again, very cool. I think that this kind of linking up of the failed monitor run directly into like the why it failed is very valuable. So I've got one more example for us, but maybe before I do that, I'll just kind of run through a few of these other options here. I think one of the things Ben had asked me to talk about is the alerting side. So alerting for monitors is pretty straightforward. We're actually working right now on making this even more straightforward, but right now you can basically come in here into your monitor configuration, set who you want to be notified for it, and that person will get an email. So if I go and save this, I can then expect that to happen. I won't demo it, but I can give you my word that it will email you. If you want to get even fancier, you can actually come in now that we've set that up and actually get into the alert rule that triggers it for us. So we could actually come in here then, and instead of just sending a notification to me, we could also maybe say, send a notification to, well, I don't have Slack set up, but you know, we could send a notification to Slack. Or any one of the other Sentry integrations that accepts notifications. Like I said, we're actually working on kind of fleshing that out even more right now to give a little bit more of a unified kind of alerting experience, but it is already pretty good. There's a few other options here maybe I just kind of want to touch on. You can also set the missed window, which is basically if, you know, for example, let's say you have a cron job that runs once a day, and maybe your runner might not happen immediately on the minute. It might, you know, take a minute for it to run for whatever reason. You could say that it has to happen within 10 minutes of when the schedule is expected. You can also set how long the monitor is expected to run for, which can be useful to detect monitors that maybe are stuck in like a loop or something along those lines, where basically it's running, but something is definitely wrong. So I could say, you know, I don't expect to process payments for more than 20 minutes. And if it takes longer than that, Sentry will actually generate a timed out check-in for you. Again, pretty useful. So let's go ahead and go back. I've got one more demo for us here. I know I'm kind of running up on the time, but let's see what we can do. So I have this Python auto instrument demo. And if we look at this, this is pretty different from the other demos, where no longer are we using a cron tab file, but now if we look at our jobs.py, we're actually using Python's Celery. So if you're not familiar with Celery, it's essentially a task runner, and one of the things that it can do is run tasks in a, I think what they call it is Celery beat, which is essentially very, very similar to a cron tab. So you can even see here, I've got this line where I say add periodic task, and I give it this cron tab format. And in this scenario, I'm saying I want it to run every minute of every day of every hour of every blah, 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 blah. So it will run this check once a minute task, where it checks the thing every minute, sleeps for 2 seconds, and then finishes. So the cool thing that we have for Celery and a couple other integrations is auto instrumentation, which what that looks like is that the Sentry SDK can actually fully detect the schedule of all of your configured tasks in Celery. The advantage of that is if you maybe have 20 or 30 of these kind of tasks that happen on various different schedules, you probably wouldn't want to have to go into the Sentry UI and, you know, hit add monitor, go through the whole process of, you know, what was the schedule, et cetera, et cetera. We've made that pretty straightforward. So if we go back to our docs here, let's go ahead and jump into the Crons product section, go into setup, and you can see here for Python, we have Celery. For Node, I think we also have Next, which you can do tasks. If you're using for Cell, you can use their cron job feature, which I think they just released, and I believe we already fully support. But let's keep going and run through the Crons Celery setup. So kind of the same thing, we'll want to go ahead and set up our Python SDK, And this time we'll want to set it up with the Celery integration. So let's go ahead and make sure that this is set to the right project. And let's just copy this over. Paste this up here. Move this init down to here. And we don't really care too much about this. Okay, so that's step one, is bringing that in. And then I think step two is go ahead. Oh, that's right. I actually could have just copied this. In fact, well, let's do that. Let's bring this. So yeah, I think step two is going to be actually initializing it with this monitor beat task true. And I think one other important bit is that it happens in this Celery D init connect signal. So let's go ahead and copy this over. In fact, we did not need to do this. We will do that. And oh, missed the signal. That is important. I think we just need the Celery signals. Cool. Okay. That looks right. So by enabling this monitor beat tasks true, can we do this? We don't have any documentation there. So by enabling the monitor beat task true, it will actually do what I said, where it will automatically see that we've configured these tasks, and it should automatically pick up on them, and it should automatically generate Sentry monitors for those tasks. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So if we call run.sh, it should bring up our Celery worker. And this might take a second because I do have it set to run every minute. And I did kind of play with this yesterday, and sometimes it would run right away. Other times I think it would wait for the minute. So we'll just see what happens here. And maybe I'll just end up talking for a minute while we wait for Celery to run.
There was actually a question about attachments.
Is there a question?
About attachment.
Yeah.
Talk about adding attachment.
Yeah. So there is right now a feature to, let's go back over here. There is actually a feature to add attachments, though I think that is actually something else that we're kind of actively thinking about and actively looking to make better. If we come back and actually look at one of our monitors here, which we should be able to see that there is indeed a attachments column here. And I think if we go through and look at our documentation, I think right now the only system that supports attachments is the HTTP.
Yeah.
I guess what would we call this? Is the HTTP way of sending check-ins. You can actually, after creating a check-in, you can go ahead and make this API call to essentially just upload a file. So that could be useful if you wanted to, say, for example, attach logs to your failed check-ins. Yeah, you absolutely can do that. I don't think I have a demo ready for that right away, but definitely check through the documentation. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back over here. It looks like our task has run, not once, but actually twice. And it looks like it's run, it's completed, and it's succeeded. So let's go ahead and jump back over to here. And if we look, we can actually see that we already have this new monitor check-in, or sorry, this new monitor that's been automatically created here for us. So just kind of looking at this, it looks like it's set up the schedule to be the same as what we configured. It's already sent us 2 successful check-ins. And if it actually was to fail, I think we would also have the automatic tracing integration here, where you would actually see the Sentry issues that were generated while the monitor, when the monitor failed. And of course, we could add more of these periodic tasks. For example, if it was once every hour, we'll just have it run the same thing. But I think when we run that, though actually I don't know if it will run immedately, it would generate a new monitor for that configured task. Let's not wait for it. So that's pretty much it for what I have to demo right now. Again, these are kind of the more straightforward examples, with the auto instrumentation being probably the little bit more fancy, a little bit more advanced, but I think people have generally found that to be pretty valuable, especially when they have a number of different tasks and not just a couple, here and there. Yeah, I think that is about it for me.